Let me get my kartal. Ramaस्थान Divya Chintamani Dhama Ratana Mandira Manohara Vrindavana Ramyasthana Divya Chintamani Dhama Ratana Mandira Manohara Abrata Kalindi Nire Raja Hamsa Kelikare Kahe Shobhe Kanaka Kamala Tara Madhye Hema Pitha Astadale Veshtita Ashtadale Pradhana Naika Tara Madhye Ratnasane Basiya Che Dui Jane Shama Sange Sundari Radhika Orupala Vanyarasi Amiya Pariche Kasi Hasya Parihasa Sambhashani Narottama Dasa Koi Nitya Leela Sukha Moi Sada Sphurat Moramane Vrindavana Ramyasthana Divya Chintamani Dhama Ratana Simhasa Ratana Mandira Manohara Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Can somebody read the translation, please? Beautiful translation.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please. I'm sorry, Mataji, you can read it now.
Beautiful Vrindavana is filled with Chintamani gems and many jewel places, palaces and temples. Many regal swans play in the waters of Yamuna and golden lotus flower grows. In the middle of the lotus is a golden place surrounded by 8 petals. On these 8 petals, the 8 principal gopis reside, and in the center, beautiful Srimati Radharani sit on a jewel throne. The great beauty of the divine couple and their charming joking and laughter continually showers nectar everywhere. Narottama Dasa says, I pray to transcendental pastimes of the divine couple may be always manifested in my heart. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. I was just imagining that in the next boat festival, we should have this lotus flower and make Radha Gopikulla sit on that, and we all make Radha and Krishna have the pleasure of boat festival. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Mataji, for reading it. Start with our prayers. continue your class. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunadhanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Naranam Namaskrutyam Narancheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktit Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Namah Pankajanabhaya Namah Pankajamaline Namah Pankajanetraya Namaste Pankajangraye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishya Namaha Namo Brahmanyaya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagaddhitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Mukam Karvati Vacharam Pangam Langavate Girim Yatkarbahatamaham Mande Sri Gurum Denitaranam Sri Paramandamadam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Om Pavitra Pavitra Va Sarvavastangatopi Va Smaret Pandarikaksham Sabhya Vihantaram Sachi Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu. Hare Krishna Prabhuji Maharaj Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna Lilananda Prabhu Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna
Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam Prabhu. All goes to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you very much for joining. Today we are going to continue chapter 27 from Canto 3. Yesterday we covered first 10 slokas. I will just give a brief recap of what we studied. The chapter title is Understanding Material Nature. So in this chapter, Kapila Muni is already preaching Devahuti, and it's been continuing from the last two chapters, 25 and 26. And they are very big chapters, have been covered by Prasad Prabhu and other people nicely in the last 4 classes actually. So we spent very good time, sufficient time on that. And in this chapter, Kapila Muni is going to is answering at least 2 questions from Devahuti, the Jiva's conditioned state and how to attain liberation. And this chapter is completely of Jnana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga. And at the end, Kapila Muni kind of gives that Bhakti Yoga is at topmost. And if you can see in the purports, even though it's Sankhya and Jnana Yoga's slokas, Srila Prabhupada, with his unlimited mercy, he talks about Bhakti Yoga throughout so that we don't get deviated. For the people who are looking for Jnana details, they will be available in the slokas, but Prabhupada always brings the point of Bhakti Yoga every time so that we don't get deviated. So the first few slokas, they talk about the jiva in the conditioned state, and how jiva, the spirit soul, is misidentifying itself with the prakriti and getting attached to the body. And the solutions are explained in the later slokas about how to control your mind through bhakti, yoga, and virakti. And Ashtanga yoga is also mentioned in this slokas about and hearing and the faith in the Lord, and what kind of qualities that needs to be cultivated by jnanis to attain the ultimate goal of life, and the characteristics of Lord. And from 12 until from 11 and onwards, there are parallels between soul and super soul, and how soul without material coverings can be uncovered. And there are, how, and then devotee again starts asking questions from 17th sloka about rarity of liberation. How difficult is liberation? She asks. You're telling all these things, but how easy or difficult is liberation, and how somebody can get liberated? And fear of bondage might appear again. So the Sankhya Yoga is giving the knowledge, but the knowledge temporarily will help you to continue, but after some time again it will come back to normal state, until unless you apply Bhakti Yoga to it, and the service, devotional service, you'll not be in the right path, is what is mentioned here. And Kapila Muni recommends intense practice for a long time, and with knowledge and renunciation and austerity is what is Kapila Muni is mentioning. And yesterday we talked about so many slokas from Bhagavatam has parallels to slokas in Bhagavad Gita. That's why this is called Kapila Gita also. So that's how we'll continue. So let's start with 11th sloka. Okay. Share my screen. Here. Sloka 11. Muktalingam sad abhasam asati pratipadyate sato bandhum asad-chakshu sarvan yushyatam advayam. Translation: a liberated soul realizes the absolute personality of Godhead, who is transcendental and who is manifest also as reflection even in the false ego. He is the support of material cause, and he enters into everything. He is the absolute one without a second, and he is the eyes of the illusionary energy. So in this shloka, the super soul has been described nicely. Can somebody read the purport, please? Characteristics of super soul has been described here. Yes, Mataji.
If you devotee can see the presence of Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything materially manifested. He is present there only as a reflection, but if you devotee can realize that the darkness of material illusion, the only light is the Supreme Lord, who is its support. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that the background of material manifestation is Lord Krishna. And as confirmed in Brahma Samhita, Krishna is the cause of all causes. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the Supreme Lord, by his partial or plenary expansion, is present not only within this universe and each and every universe, but in every atom, although he is one without a second. The word Advayam, without a second, which is used in this verse, indicates that although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is represented in everything, including the atoms, he is not divided. His presence in everything is explained in the next verse. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. So from this sloka, what a super soul has been described here, and there are multiple phrases that are used to describe super soul, the characteristics of super soul. Asati sad abhasam, that's one of the words that is used, means manifest as reflection, even the false ego. Right? True ego is and identifying that I'm not the body. False ego is identifying that I'm the body. Even in there, super soul is present. Sato bandhum, the cause of prakriti. So super soul is the cause of prakriti. He's the one who is manifesting the prakriti. Asat chakshusha, the revealer of material elements. He is the one that is revealing all the material elements to us. Sarvanu shutam, pervading into everything. So he is all pervading. He is in every atom, every universe, and there is no second for him. He is only the only one and the primary always. Advayam is only one without a second. He is the only one that is there. He is not divided. That's what he says. Like it's the only one, but he is there everywhere. That is the beauty. That is the wonderfulness of super soul. So Kapil Muni is explaining the super soul Paramatma in this shloka. Let's go to the next one. 12th. Yatha jalastha abhasa sthala stena vadrishyate swabhashena tatho suryo jalasthena divistitaha. Translation. The presence of super soul can be realized just as sun is realized first as a reflection on water, and again the second reflection on the wall of the room, although the sun itself is situated in the sky. The nice analogy is given about super soul in this shloka. Please, can somebody read the purport?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, please.
Purport by His Divinely A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The example given herewith is perfect. The sun is situated in the sky, far, far away from the surface of the earth. But its reflection can be seen in a pot of water in the corner of a room. The room is dark and the sun is far away in the sky. But the sun's reflection on the water illuminates the darkness of the room. A pure devotee can realize the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything by the reflection of his energy. In the Vishnu Purana, it is stated that as the presence of fire is understood by heat and light, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although one without a second, is perceived everywhere by the diffusion of his different energies. It is confirmed in the Ishopanishad that the presence of the Lord is perceived everywhere by the liberated soul. Just as the sunshine and the reflection can be perceived everywhere, although the sun is situated far away from the surface of the globe. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. One beautiful example is given by Lord Kapil Dev here. How in a dark room, say there is a sun rays are falling into the room through a small hole, and there is a pot of water. And the sun rays fall on the pot of water on the surface, and they reflect just like a mirror throughout the room, and they diffuse, and then they lighten up the room. So like that, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is far, far away in some other place. But because the sun rays are falling into the water and it is showing up in the room and by the reflection of the energy. Like that, a pure devotee can realize the presence of the Lord in everywhere. That is the realization of a pure devotee. And another example is given as the fire. Say if there is a wood burning, and you will, even the wood is burning, you will feel the heat and the light, both. And that is another example that is given. And so the last example from Ishopanishad is the presence of Lord is perceived everywhere by liberated soul, just as sunshine and reflection can be perceived everywhere. The sunshine, even the sun is very far away. The sunshine falls on every living being, on every living atom, every atom on the universe and within the universe. So that's how the liberated souls perceive. So sun in the sky, reflected on the water, reflection of water on the wall, that is the inference of the sun, right? And Supreme Lord reflected in everything by his energies, right? So all the energies of the Lord, you can see all around you. That is a reflection of the Supreme Lord, and that is the inference that Lord is present, in every atom and every energy that we see around. So this is a beautiful explanation of super soul for us. 13th. Evam trivrid ahankaro bhutendriya manmanayo swabhashayar Lakshito nena sad abhasena satyadrik. Translation. The self-realized soul is thus reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and mind. Now, can somebody read the purport, please? Hare Krishna.
The conditioned soul thinks I am this body, but a liberated soul thinks I am not this body. I am spirit soul. This I am is called ego or identification of self. I am this body or everything in relation to this body is mine is called false ego. But when one is self-realized and thinks that he is an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, that identification is real ego. One conception is that the darkness of the threefold qualities of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and the other is in the pure state of goodness called Shuddha Sattva or Vasudeva. When we say that we give up our ego, this means that we give up our false ego, but real ego is always present. When one is reflected through the material contamination of the body and mind in false identification, he is in the conditioned state. But when he is reflected in the pure state, he is called liberated. The identification of oneself with the one's material position in the conditioned state must be purified, and one must identify himself in relation with the Supreme Lord. In the conditioned state, one accepts everything as an object of sense gratification, and in the liberated state, one accepts everything as the service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness, devotional service is the actual liberated state of living entity. Otherwise, both accepting and rejecting on the material platform or in voidness of impersonalism are imperfect conditions of the pure soul.
Continue, Prabhuji.
By the understanding of the pure soul called Satya
Drik.
one can see everything as a reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A concrete example can be given in this connection. A conditioned soul sees a very beautiful rose, and he thinks that the nice aromatic flower should be used for his own sense gratification. This is one kind of vision. A liberated soul, however, sees the same flower as a reflection of the Supreme Lord. He thinks this beautiful flower is made possible by the superior energy of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it belongs to the Supreme Lord and should be utilized in his service. These are the two kinds of visions. The conditioned soul sees the flower for his own enjoyment, and the devotee sees the flower as an object used in the service of the Lord. In the same way, one can see the reflection of the Supreme Lord in one's own sense, mind, and body, in everything. With the correct vision, one can engage everything in the service of the Lord. It is stated in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that one who has engaged everything, his vital energy, his wealth, his intelligence, and his words in service of the Lord, or who desires to engage all these in the service of the Lord, no matter how he is situated, is to be considered a liberated soul or the Satyadrik. Such a man has understood things in they are.
As they are. Very nice, simple, detailed purport of Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So in the first paragraph, Prabhupada is explaining what is true ego and false ego. False ego is identifying I'm body, and true ego is understanding that my relationship with the Supreme Lord, and that is the real ego. So, and I'm not this body, I'm the soul, right? We have to give up our false ego and go towards the true ego, and that's when we will be liberated souls. The liberated souls always think I'm not this body and I'm an eternal servitor of the Lord, right? That's what is beautifully explained in the first paragraph. The identification of oneself with one's material positions in the conditional stage must be purified, and one must identify himself in the relationship with Supreme Lord. In the conditioned state, one accepts everything as an object of sense gratification. So, in the conditioned stage, we see everything as object sense gratification, but in the liberated stage, one accepts everything in the service of Supreme Lord. That is what is the liberated stage is. And in the second paragraph, Prabhupada explains a beautiful example of seeing a rose. And in the conditioned stage, what we think, oh, this is a beautiful rose. Let me smell it. Let me use it for my own sense gratification. But when you are above that, when you are going towards this liberated stage, you will think, oh, such a beautiful creation by the Lord. Let me offer it to the Lord. Similarly, you think about anything like that. That is how you think about the Lord all the time. You go to the market and see beautiful mangoes, like, nice mangoes, ripened mangoes. You think, oh, that's a beautiful creation of the Lord. In summer, we get nice mangoes. And first, let me offer, these are for the Lord's pleasure. And let me offer and do a mango festival or something like that. And then after that, you take it as a prasadam, right? That is the correct vision of somebody who is going towards the liberated state. And in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it says, everything that you have in your possession should be used in the service of the Lord. Your energy, your wealth, intelligence, and words. And all of them should be utilized in the service of the Lord. And that is what you consider as liberated soul, or Satyadrik. Satyadrik is the word used here as the person who sees things in the liberated state. And that's what Prabhupada is explaining beautifully in these two paragraphs. 14. Bhuta sukshmendriya mano buddhi adishva iha nidraya lineshva asati yas tatra vinidro nirahankriya. Translation. Although devotee appears to be merged in the five material elements, the objects of material enjoyment, the material senses and material mind and intelligence, is understood to be awake and to be freed from the false ego. So, description of the devotee is being given here. Sometimes devotees, when you see from outside, they appear in the material world and material enjoyment, but they are all freed and they are utilizing their senses and their services towards the Lord. Yeah, can somebody read the purport, please?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Shall I read?
Yes, please.
The explanation by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of how a person can be liberated even in this body is more elaborately explained in this verse. The living entity who has become Satyadrik, who realizes his position in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, may remain apparently merged in the five elements of matter, the five material sense objects, the 10 senses, and the mind and intelligence. But still he is considered to be awake and to be freed from the reaction of false ego. Here, the word Lina is very significant. The Mayavadi philosophers recommend merging in the impersonal effulgence of Brahman. That is their ultimate goal or destination. That merging is also mentioned here. But in spite of merging, one can keep his individuality. The example given by Jiva Goswami is that a green bird that enters a green tree appears to merge in the color of greenness, but actually the bird does not lose its individuality. Similarly, a living entity merged either in the material nature or in the spiritual nature does not give up his individuality. Real individuality is to understand oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. This information is received from the mouth of Lord Chaitanya. He said clearly upon the inquiry of Sanatana Goswami that a living entity is the servitor of Krishna eternally. Krishna also confirms in Bhagavad Gita that the living entity is eternally his part and parcel. The part and parcel is meant to serve the whole. This is individuality. It is so even in this material existence when the living entity apparently merges in matter. His gross body is made up of five elements. His subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness. And he has five active senses and five knowledge acquiring senses. In this way, he merges in matter. But even while merged in the 24 elements of what matter, he can keep his individuality as the eternal servitor of the Lord, either in the spiritual nature or in the material nature. Such a servitor is to be considered a liberated soul. That is the explanation of the authorities, and it is confirmed in this verse. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hari Bol. So, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how a Satyadruk, liberated soul, realizes his position in relationship with the Lord, Supreme Personality of the Lord. word that is used in this sloka is Lina. Lina is like merging. But a lot of people might take a wrong understanding of merging into the Lord, the impersonalists especially. So Srila Prabhupada is clearly explaining what is merging into the super soul means here. What is merging means here. Not in the super soul, what is the merging means. He says, we have the material body, we are made up by the gross elements. And that means we have the material elements in us, but doesn't mean we are merging into the system. Right? We are still different, and an example is given as a green bird sitting in a green tree appears to be merged. I mean, you can't identify the bird specifically unless until you really focus and see. It appears to be merged, it is not merged. It keeps its individuality, right? The individual soul never gives up his individuality, and he's always the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. And Lord Chaitanya also explains this to Sanatana Goswami, that living entity is always a part and parcel. A part and parcel means a part and parcel. It's never the whole. It is like your hand and you are the body. The hand is the part and parcel of the body. It is never the body itself completely. So that is what Prabhupada is explaining, so that we don't get confused of this impersonalism or Mayavadi philosophers, which recommend merging into impersonal effulgence of Brahman. That is not our destination. Our destination is to be part and parcel of the Lord, which means we are eternal servitors of the Lord all the time. The soul is pure, free from the false ego, and yet appears to be covered by the false ego and products. And it always is serving Supreme Lord. (15) Manyamanas tadatmanam nashtavan mrisha nashte ahankarane drashta nashtavitta ivatura. Translation: the living entity can vividly feel his existence as a seer, but because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely takes himself to be lost, like a man who has lost his fortune and feels distressed, thinking himself to be the lost. Can somebody read the purport, please?
Can I read, Prabhuji? Hare Krishna, Dhanava Pranam, Praveen Prabhu.
Yes, please.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Only in ignorance does a living entity think that he is lost. If by attainment of knowledge he comes to the real position of his eternal existence, he knows that he is not lost. An appropriate example is mentioned herein. Nasta vitta ivaturaha. A person who has lost a great sum of money may think that he is lost, but actually is not lost. Only his money is lost. But due to his absorption in the money or identification with the money, he thinks that he is lost. Similarly, when we falsely identify with the matter as our field of activities, we think that we are lost, although actually we are not. As soon as a person is awakened to the pure knowledge of understanding that he is an eternal servitor of the Lord, his own real position is revived. A living entity can never be lost. When one forgets his identity in deep sleep, he becomes absorbed in dreams, and he may think himself a different person or may think himself lost, but actually his identity is intact. This concept of being lost is due to false ego, and it continues as long as one is not awakened to the sense of his existence as an eternal servitor of the Lord. The Mayavadi philosopher's concept of becoming one with the Supreme Lord is another symptom of being lost in false ego. One may falsely claim that he is the Supreme Lord, but actually is not. This is the last snare of Maya's influence upon the living entity. To think oneself equal with the Supreme Lord or to think oneself to be the Supreme Lord himself is also due to false ego. Thank you for the
Yeah. So the living entity can see his existence and feel his existence. But because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of sleep, just like when you sleep, you are in a different state and you feel, you see, different things. You appear, you think that something is lost, but it is not lost, because your real identity is still the soul, right? Another example is given as people identify, say, I have money with me and my money is lost and I feel that I am lost, but actually the money is lost. You are still there. Your identity is still there. People identify themselves with this material world and they feel that they know they are lost, but they are not. Their original identity is still there, because the field of activities are still there. We think we are lost, but we are not lost. And how you attain this knowledge that you are not lost, the knowledge that you are getting through these shlokas, the Jnana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, you are understanding the difference between the material elements and spiritual elements, and the gross elements and the subtle elements, and the spirit soul versus the material body. If you understand the difference between false ego and true ego, when you get that knowledge, then you will get out of that understanding that I am not lost. My identity is intact, right? That's what Prabhupada is explaining here. And Mayavadi philosophers also think two things. One, they think they're, one thinks equal to Supreme Lord, or think that oneself is the Supreme Lord, or they're merging into Lord. Both are condemned here. You cannot do that. Living entity is always individual and always existential. Although yes, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, ikkada living entity can vividly feel his existence as seer. Seer and sadhu.
No, seer. Somebody who sees, not sadhu. Seer.
Oh, seer. Okay.
Seer. So it's not the seer thing. It's like he's seeing his own thing. See. See. So although he can feel his existence vividly, he thinks that he is lost and feels distressed, like a person who lost his wealth, with the disappearance of the false ego. But during these plea for universal destruction, whenever that happens, but he is not lost. It's always eternal, right? (16) Evam pratyavamshraya swa atmanam pratipadyate sahankarasya dravyasya yo vastanam anugraha. Translation: when by mature understanding one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. So, similar explanation about soul is given here. Let's see what we can read here. The second paragraph we can read here. Can somebody read the second paragraph? Yes, please.
It is stated in the Ishopanishad that everything belongs to Lord. Isha Vasham Idam Sarvam. Everything exists on the energy of Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, because everything is produced of his energy and exists on his energy. The energy is not different from him, but still the Lord declares, I am not there. When one clearly understands one's constitutional position, everything becomes manifest. False egoistic acceptance of things conditions one, whereas acceptance of things as they are make one liberated. The example given in the previous words is applicable here. Due to absorption of one's identity in his money, when the money is lost, he thinks he is also lost. But actually, he is not identical with the money, nor does the money belongs to him. When the actual situation is revealed, we understand that the money does not belong to any individual person or living entity, nor it is produced by man. Ultimately, the money is proprietor of Supreme Lord, and there is no question of it being lost. But as long as one falsely thinks, I am the enjoyer or I am the Lord, the concept of life continues, and one remains conditioned. As soon as this false ego is eliminated, one is liberated, as confirmed in Bhagavatam. Situation in one's real constitutional position is called mukti or liberation.
Yes. The same explanation from the previous verse is continuing here. And Lord Kapildev is talking about the soul and how one can think that, I'm lost. I'm not lost, because more example of the money part is given here. Ultimately, money is not lost. Some amount of money is still there in the system, and money doesn't belong to you. The higher understanding of that is money belongs to the Lord, and it is never lost. It's always there. And we are two things. We are identifying with the money, which is not ours, and it's not lost. Both are not true, right? So that is the example that is given here. And the concept of life continues, and one remains conditioned. As long as you think I'm the enjoyer, I'm the Lord. Once you get out of the condition, and once you get out understanding that is not mine and it is not lost, then you are liberated. That is the state of liberation. 17. So from this verse onwards, devotees started again asking some more questions, as the previous questions are already answered by Kapil Muni. So let's read this. Devahutir uvacha purusham prakritir brahman na vimunchanti karhichit anyonya pashrayat tvachak cha nityavad anayo prabho. Sri Devahuti inquired, my dear Brahmana, does material nature ever give release to a spirit soul? Since one is attracted to the other eternally, how is this separation possible? So Devahuti is asking very clearly here, how is liberation possible here? The materials, the material nature is, people are identifying it so much, tied up, very much tightly coupled. How is this liberation possible? Because it's so tightly coupled. How is this possible is her question. Let me read this purport. Devahuti, the mother of Kapildeva, here makes her first inquiry. Although one may understand that spirit, soul, and matter are different, their actual separation is not possible, either by philosophical speculation or by proper understanding. The spirit soul is the marginal potency of the Supreme Lord, and the matter is the external potency of the Lord. The two eternal potencies leave somehow, have somehow or other been combined. And since it is so difficult to separate one from the other, how is it possible for the individual soul to become liberated? By practical experience, one can see that when the soul is separated from the body has no real existence. And when body is separated from the soul, one cannot perceive the existence of the soul. As long as the soul and body are combined, we can understand that there is life. But when they're separated, there is no manifested existence of the body or the soul. This question asked by Devahuti of Kapiladev is more or less impelled by the philosophy of voidism. The voidists say that the consciousness is a product of combination of matter, and that as soon as the consciousness is gone, the material combination dissolves. And therefore, this is ultimately nothing but voidness. The absence of consciousness is called nirvana in Mayavada philosophy. So, one of the things that Devahuti is doing here is to help us understand what is voidism and how to really understand the question. She's asking how, when they are so much tightly coupled, they can be liberated, and how is it possible? Because voidists think that consciousness is made of materials, not of soul. They don't consider soul as one of the parts. They don't think about that, right? And it's been the answers will be given in the future slokas. Even the next slokam is a question as well from Devahuti. Continuous question. Yatha gandhasya bhumescha na bhavo vyatirekataha apam rasasya cha yatha tatha buddhe parasya cha. Translation. As there is no separate existence of the earth and its aroma, or the water and its taste, there cannot be any separate existence of intelligence and consciousness. This is a continuous question. I'll read the purport. The example is given here that anything material has an aroma. The flower, the earth, everything has an aroma. If the aroma is separate from the matter cannot be identified. If there is no taste to the water has no meaning, and there is no heat in the fire has no meaning. Similarly, when there is want of intelligence, spirit has no meaning. So she is giving more strength to her questions, because she's thinking they are too tightly coupled and how they can be separated. Because once they're separated, there is no meaning of one another. For example, earth is identified by some smell, some aroma. When the first rain comes, you can smell that nice aroma of fresh rain on the mud. And again, the flower has an aroma. When they're separated, you cannot identify which one is which, right? And she's asking, how is it possible? So let's see what Kapila Muni explains in the future slokas. Yeah, I think this is a continuation of questions. 17 to 20 are all questions. So I'll read the questions again. Akartu karma bandhoyam purushasya yadashraya guneshu satsu prakrute kaivalyam teshva atah katham. Translation. Hence, even though he is the passive performer of all activities, how can there be freedom for soul as long as material nature acts on him and binds him? Is a continuation of the same question. So I'm not going to read the purport. Please go back and read the purport. But it's again continuation of the same question. In the interest of time. 20. Kvachit tattva vamarshena nirvattam bhayam ulbanam anivratta nimittatvat punah pratya vatistate. Even if the great fear of bondage is avoided by mental speculation and inquiry into fundamental principles, it may still appear again since its cause has not been seized. So Kapila Muni has given so much of knowledge so far, the knowledge of soul and super soul, false ego, true ego. So the devotee is asking, yes, you have given so much knowledge, but temporarily this knowledge will help me. But again, I get back the same questions because the cause of this problem has not been addressed, right? The cause has not ceased, is what she is asking. So let's see the recommendation of Kapila Muni for these questions. Here we'll read all the purports because they're very important. 21. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Animitta Nimittena Swadharmena Malatmana Tivraya Mai Bhaktyacha Shruta Sambhratya Chiram. So what Kapila Muni is recommending is intense practice. Tivraya Mai Bhaktyacha. Intense bhakti is what is recommending. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. Thus, by executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction and one will be freed from the contamination of matter. Now, let's read the purports here. Can somebody read the purport of this shloka, please? Anyone?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, shall I?
Please.
Purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sridhara Swami comments in this connection that by association with material nature alone, one does not become conditioned. Conditional life begins only after one is infected by the modes of material nature. If someone is in contact with the police department, that does not mean that he is a criminal. As long as one does not commit criminal acts, even though there is a police department, he is not punished. Similarly, the liberated soul is not affected, although he is in the material nature. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is supposed to be in association with material nature when he descends, but he is not affected. One has to act in such a way that, in spite of being in the material nature, he is not affected by contamination. Although the lotus flower is in association with water, it does not mix with the water. That is how one has to live, as described here by the personality of Godhead Kapila Deva. Animitta nimittena swadharmena amalatmana. One can be liberated from all adverse circumstances simply by seriously engaging in devotional service. How this devotional service develops and becomes mature is explained here. In the beginning, one has to perform his prescribed duties with a clean mind. Clean consciousness means Krishna consciousness. One has to perform his prescribed duties in Krishna consciousness. There is no necessity of changing one's prescribed duties. One simply has to act in Krishna consciousness. In discharging Krishna conscious duties, one should determine whether by his professional or occupational duties, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is satisfied. In another place in the Bhagavatam, it is said, Swanustitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. Everyone has some prescribed duties to perform, but the perfection of such duties will be reached only if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is satisfied by such actions. For example, Arjuna's prescribed duties was to fight, and the perfection of his fighting was tested by the satisfaction of Krishna. Krishna wanted him to fight, and when he fought for the satisfaction of the Lord, that was the perfection of his professional devotional duty. On the other hand, when contrary to the wish of Krishna, he was not willing to fight, that was imperfect.
Continue, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Prabhu, can you please scroll up? Yeah. If,
Yes,
yeah.
Prabhuji.
If one wants to perfect his life, he should discharge his prescribed duties for the satisfaction of Krishna. One must act Krishna consciousness, for such action will never produce any reaction. Animitta nimittena. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Yagnartat karmano nyatra. All activities should be performed simply for yajna or the satisfaction of Vishnu. Anything done otherwise without the satisfaction of Vishnu or yajna produce bondage. So here it is also prescribed by Kapila Muni that one can transcend material entanglement by acting in Krishna consciousness, which means seriously engaging in devotional service. This serious devotional service can develop by hearing for long periods of time. Chanting and hearing is the beginning of the process of devotional service. One should associate with the devotees and hear from them about the Lord's transcendental appearance, activities, disappearance, instructions, etc. There are two kinds of Shruti or scripture. One is spoken by the Lord and the other is spoken about the Lord and his devotees. Bhagavad Gita is the former and Srimad Bhagavatam the later. One must hear these scriptures repeatedly from reliable source in order to become fixed in serious devotional service. Through engagement in such devotional service, one becomes freed from the contamination of Maya. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead cleanses the heart of all contamination caused by the influence of three modes of material nature. By continuous, regular hearing, the effects of the contamination of lust and greed to enjoy or lord it over material nature diminish. And when lust and greed diminish, one then becomes situated in the mode of goodness. This is the stage of Brahman realization or spiritual realization. In this way, one becomes fixed on the transcendental platform. Remaining fixed on the transcendental platform is liberation from material engagement. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hari Bol. Super purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Kapila Muni is explaining how to get liberated, and because Devhuti asked 4 questions, it's very tight. The tight coupling is there between the body and the soul, and the soul, the living entity always thinks I am bound and I am very much attached to this material world. How to get liberated? It's doesn't look like easy to me. They're very tightly coupled, and the Kapila Muni is explaining the process of liberation here. And the process of liberation is very clearly told as do intense practice of bhakti. Tivraya bhakta chiram. That's what is told. Tivraya means serious. Mai bhaktya, devotional service unto me, is what is told here. By executing a prescribed duties. So multiple paragraphs. I'll just take some synopsis from each of them. So first example that is given is by Kapila Muni is Prabhupada's purports is, if somebody is in touch with police department, that doesn't mean you are a criminal, right? So if just because you're associated with material nature, you're not really attached to it. Only when you commit crimes, then you have a contact with police department, or they will be punished, right? Similarly, a liberated soul is not affected, although he's in the material nature. He's aloof from it, just like a lotus flower is in the water, but it is not mixed with the water. There's another example that is given, right? And they are not contaminated. This is how one has to live, is what Kapil Dev is telling. Animitya nimittena, not attached, and continue your prescribed duties. And second thing is you have to be continuously engaged in devotional service. That is one more thing. And while doing your prescribed duties, that's another important thing. So in discharging Krishna conscious duties, one should determine whether by his professional or occupational duties, Krishna or Supreme Personality of God is satisfied. Ultimate goal is to satisfy Lord Krishna and make him pleased all the time. Right? That's another thing. So Arjuna's prescribed duty was to fight, and the perfection of this fighting was tested by the satisfaction of Krishna. So in the beginning, Arjuna didn't want to fight, and not willing to fight. That was imperfect. But once he started listening to Krishna, that is perfect. Then he is discharging his prescribed duties as a warrior, as a Kshatriya. His duty is to fight. And everything we do should be performed with simply the satisfaction of the Vishnu. Yajnavat karmano nyatra. Bhagavad Gita also says the same thing. And how do you develop that? You keep doing it for long times. This serious devotional service can develop by hearing from long time. Chanting and hearing as a beginning process. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. The 9 process of bhakti. Starting is Shravanam. And you are all doing that as we speak. Nicely hearing and reading with me all the things. Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, you are participating in Sunday class, Saturday class, Ekadashi. All this is hearing. You are hearing lectures continuously for a long period of time. And that is when the realization comes. And that is the beginning of the devotional service. And association. Association is very important. You're associating nicely with devotees, participating in festivals, planning for festivals. And, you're always with the association of devotees. That will help a lot in this process. Right? By continuous regular hearing, the effects of contamination of lust and greed or to enjoy or lord it over material will diminish. And when the lust and greed diminish, one becomes situated in the mode of goodness. And this is the state of Brahman realization or spiritualization. In this way, one becomes fixed in the transcendental platform. Remaining fixed in the transcendental platform is liberation. So ultimately, Kapila Muni is telling, hearing, reading, association, discharging your prescribed duties for a longer period of times will get you into the state of goodness, sattva guna, shuddha sattva, and that's when you get into the stage of Brahma realization, and that is how you get liberated from the material entanglement. Is very clearly mentioned by Kapil Muni here.
Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, second paragraph lo, prescribed duties, occupational duties and professional duties for satisfaction of Hari. Hari is satisfied and etla anukovali, Prabhuji.
Okay. So basically my prescribed duty is to do the job because I am a Grihastha and I need to take care of the family. And how am I satisfying Hari? Because my family is given by Krishna to take care, right? I'm a caretaker, right? That is one way to think about it. And my prescribed duties is when I'm associating with other devotees, I'm participating in Ratha Yatras, I'm doing service. So my prescribed duties also help do the service, either through monetarily or through personally, right? And my job is helping, with all these services, and I'm pleasing Hari, right? By donations, by your physical service, by prasadam distribution, by prasadam serving, all these things, right? I'm doing all these things while I'm doing my prescribed duties. I'm not leaving my job and renouncing and saying that I'm completely doing that. No, you're doing it as a service to Hari, and you are thinking of doing that. There is a difference between somebody who's doing a job without thinking about Krishna and the person who is doing a job much better. We are thinking of always about Krishna, right? During the week, you are thinking, I'm taking care of the family. I'm like, because they are given by Krishna, and you are giving them education, your kids, and all the stuff that is again pleasing Hari because you are taking care of them. And in the weekends, you are completely engaged with services. And the money you are getting there, you are utilizing for good purposes. So that is how you are satisfying Krishna throughout.
Thank you.
Okay, Prabhu.
Yeah.
So 22 is again continuation of the same explanation. Jnanena drishta tattvena vairagyena baliyasha tapoyuktena yogena tivrena atma samadhina. Translation: the devotional service has to be performed strongly in perfect knowledge and with transcendental vision. One must be strongly renounced and must engaged in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. Let me read this purport. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or mental concoction. It is specifically mentioned here that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge by visualizing the absolute truth. We can understand about the absolute truth by evolving transcendental knowledge, and the result of such transcendental knowledge will be manifested by renunciation. That renunciation is not temporarily or artificial, but it is very strong. It is said that development of Krishna consciousness is exhibited by proportionate material detachment or vairagya. If one does not separate himself from the material enjoyment, it is to be understood that he is not advancing in Krishna consciousness. Renunciation in Krishna consciousness is so strong that it cannot be deviated by any attractive illusion. One has to perform devotional service in full tapasya austerity. One should fast on the 2 Ekadashi days, which fall on the 11th day of the waxing and waning moon, and on the birthdays of Lord Krishna, Lord Rama, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are many such fasting days. Yogena means by controlling the senses and the mind. Yoga Indriya Samyama. Yogena implies that one is seriously absorbed in the self and is able by development of knowledge to understand his constitutional position in the relation with the super self. In this way, one becomes fixed in devotional service and his faith cannot be shaken by any material allurement. So more detailed explanation of how to get liberated is given here. How it is given here. It cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or mental concoction. It is specifically mentioned that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge. The knowledge is important. That's what we are getting all here. Like the knowledge about the soul, the material elements. It has to be done in the full knowledge. And it is said the development of Krishna consciousness is exhibited by proportionate material detachment or vairagya. If one does not separate himself from material enjoyment, it is understood that he is not advancing in Krishna consciousness. So how do you know that you are advancing in Krishna consciousness? One, your material enjoyments are reducing, your material attachment are reducing, your dealings with the people which are non-devotees reducing, and you are happy. One of the things that Prabhupada says, if you are not happy, that means you are not doing, you are not progressing in Krishna consciousness. You have to be happy in whatever you do. Whether you're doing a service, whether you're doing your household duties, whatever you're doing, one of the indications is that your material attachments are reducing. You are spending very less and less time on material attachments, right? And second thing is about tapasya, austerity has been mentioned here. That will help your Krishna consciousness awareness is tapasya. What are the tapasya that are mentioned here? Fasting on Ekadashi, like today. Today is Ekadashi. We're all, depending on your body constitution, you can do full fasting or fasting with water, fasting with milk and fruits, or even fasting with non-grains. But fasting, 2 times a month, fasting on different days like Krishnashtami, Ram Navami, Narsimha Chaturdashi, all these things are prescribed and different appearance and disappearance of acharyas. We do fasting because that is austerity on our body, which will reduce our material enjoyments, reduce our material senses enjoyment, right? And that will help in the path of liberation or understanding of this knowledge. It is very important. Austerity is also part of this process.
Sorry, first line material emotion and mental concoction and faith.
1 second, let's go here. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion and mental concoction. Mental concoction means Prabhu thinking that your own things, not prescribedly by anybody, right? Material emotions means like you are just, very emotional about things and not.
అంటే ఇప్పుడు మనకి ఏదో అయిపోతుంది చేయకపోతే అని అట్లా అనుకోవడం ఉంటుంది.
Yeah, no, Prabhuji, that is not it is. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be found when it is specifically mentioned here that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge by visualizing the absolute truth. So, Prabhuji, it's about the knowledge. So, the knowledge about Sankhya Yoga, Jnana Yoga is that we are not this body, we are the soul, and the soul is individually separate from the super soul. That is the knowledge. The material concoction here is about I will merge into Brahman, right? In the super soul, there is no individuality. That is the concoction here. A lot of impersonalists, right? They think about like that. I'm right now a soul, but at the end of my life, I'll merge into this Brahman, and they think they derive things by neti, like this is not it, this is not it. That is mental concoction, speculation, right? The jnanis, the impersonal, not jnanis, the impersonalists think about this in a different way, and the way they think is not the correct way, because they are not following the scriptures, they're not understanding correctly. So Krishna consciousness cannot be arrived by that, is what Prabhupada is telling here. You have to understand that you are individual soul and you are independent, but you are always a servitor. But impersonalists don't think like that. They're using their mental concoction, and they're thinking, I'll merge into Brahman and all this stuff. So that is a blind thing, which Prabhupada is saying, avoid that.
Okay.
23. So 23 is the result. What happens if you do Tivra Bhakti and austerity? What happens is Kapila Muni is telling here. Prakriti Purushasya Dahya Manatva Aharnisham Tiro Bhavitri Shanakair Agner Yonir Ivarani. Translation. The influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks which cause the fire are also themselves consumed by it. So this is the result of the Tivra Bhakti, and what happens. Let me read this purport. Fire is conserved in wooden sticks, and when circumstances are favorable, the fire is ignited. But the wooden sticks, which are the cause of the fire, are also consumed by the fire if it is properly dealt with. Similarly, the living entity's conditional life of material existence is due to his desire to lord it over the material nature, and due to the envy of the Supreme Lord. Thus, his main diseases are that he wants to be one with the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become the Lord of the material nature. The karmis try to utilize the resources of the material nature and thus become its lord and enjoy sense gratification. The jnanis, the salvationists who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or merge into the impersonal effulgence. These two diseases are due to material contamination. Material contamination can be consumed by devotional service, because in devotional service, these two diseases, namely the desire to lord it over and the desire to become one, are absent. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. A devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be great karmi, always working, but the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti, the devotional service. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, but when by his fighting he satisfied the senses of the Lord, he became a devotee. Since a devotee also engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as he is, his activities may thus appear to be like those of mental speculator, but actually he is trying to understand the spiritual nature and transcendental activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of the fruitive activities and empiric speculation do not, because this activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this paragraph, first paragraph, it is mentioned the two diseases, one by the karmis and one by the jnanis. The karmis try to lord over things and they want to become the lord of material enjoyment, sense gratification, and jnanis and they are frustrated, they don't want to enjoy anything, but they want to become one and merge into impersonal effulgence. And these two can be avoided and consumed by devotional service, because this will get rid of these two diseases, right? The devotional service. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service. And the example given are in the forest, the bamboo sticks, they rub against each other, and the fire is within them. And once the fire comes, the fire itself consumes the bamboo sticks also. So the fire of devotional service will reduce this, will consume these diseases, is what has been explained here. This analogy is given here, right? And externally, devotees look like they're karmis because they're always working. But in inner significance is they're all working for the Supreme Lord, and they are discharging the devotional service or bhakti, right? That's what is told here. Thus, practicing seriously, the influence of Prakriti over Jiva can be removed, just as wooden sticks that cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. So, at the end, what Kapil Muni is saying is, the result of Tivara Bhakti and austerity is that you will, steadily be in the path of devotional service. Okay. Let's see, look at the last few slokas. I was already 8. Okay, 24. Bhukta bhoga परित्यक्ता दृष्टा दोषा च नित्यशा नेश्वरास्य शुभम धत्ते स्वे महिम्नि स्थितस्य च. Translation: by discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, the living entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory, right? By discovering the faultiness of the desiring to lord over Prakriti, and by therefore giving up, the Jiva becomes independent and stand on his own glory, right? That's what he says. Like, how do we do that? To understand first that we are faulty, right? That is recognizing that I have this disease and giving it up by Bhakti Yoga, by transcendental service to the Lord and the services. By giving it up, you in the path. Because the living entity is not actually the enjoyer of the material resources, his attempt to lord it over material nature is at the ultimate issue frustrated. As a result of frustration, he desires more power than the ordinary living entity and thus wants to merge into the existence. When one is actually situated in the devotional service, that is his independent position, less intelligent men cannot understand the position of the eternal servant of the Lord, because the word servant is used. They become confused. They cannot understand that the servitude is not the servitude of the material world. To be servant of the Lord is the greatest position. If one can understand this and thus revive one's original nature of eternal servitorship of the Lord, one stands fully independent. A living entity's independence is lost by material contact. In the spiritual field, he has full independence, and therefore there is no question of becoming independent upon the three modes of material nature. This position is attained by a devotee, and therefore he gives up the tendency for material enjoyment. So the independence is a confusing thing for a living entity. Living entity which is attached by the material nature, he thinks he's independent when he's able to do things, right? People want freedom. They say, I'm free to do anything. But that is a misconception. They are not free to do anything. They are completely under the influence of Maya, and they think that is independence. But the actual independence is realizing that we are the eternal servitors of the Lord. And when we go back to the spiritual world, you have full independence. You are not bound by the material nature or the Maya. That is the real independence. So this will also be explained in the previous, in the first few slokas of this chapter. And this understanding, this knowledge for bhakta is very important. The real independence is to become a servitor, a servant. But people outside the world, the moment they hear servant word, they think it's a tabooed word, and they don't understand what a servant means. They think it's like serving somebody. But serving the Lord is the highest that you can do, right? The greatest position that you can have. And when you are serving the Lord, you are fully independent, because there is no Maya, there is no energy that is binding you, the material energy that is binding you in the spiritual world, right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. 25. Yathahi aprati buddhasya pravasvapo bahva anartha bhrit sa eva pratibuddhasya navai mohya kalpate. Translation. In the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered and one sees many inauspicious things. But when he is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. Right? This is also explained previously that people get a lot of dreams. Sometimes you're chased by an elephant or a tiger or a lion, and you appear that you lost money or whatever, right? But once you're awake, it's just a dream. All the things that people think are are all like dream-like conditions, and for us, you have to be awakened to think, oh, this is just a dream, right? Or we are all dreaming now, and we all should be awake and understand that we are the eternal servitors of the Lord, right? In the condition of dreaming, when one's consciousness is almost covered, one may see many unfavorable things which can cause disturbance or anxiety. But once you awake, although he remembers what happened to the dream, he is not disturbed. You'll remember, you are awake and then say, oh, okay, that's not happening. Similarly, in the position of self-realization, our understanding of one's real relationship with Supreme Lord makes one completely satisfied, and the three modes of material nature, which are the cause of all disturbances, cannot affect him. Right? That's what is told here. We'll go to the next sloka. Evam vidita tattvasya prakritir mai manasam yujanto napakuruta atma ramasya karhichit. Translation. The influence of material nature cannot harm an enlightened soul, even though he engages in material activities, because he knows the truth of the Absolute and his mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? The Prakriti cannot harm him because he knows absolute truth or the elements. Vividha Tattvasya, his fixed mind on me, and rejoice the self, Atma Rama. The Lord Kapila says, Mai Manasam, a devotee whose mind is always fixed upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, is called Atma Rama or Vidita Tattva. Atma Rama means one who rejoices in self, one who enjoys in spiritual atmosphere. Atma in the material sense means the body or the mind, but when referring to one whose mind is fixed in the lotus feet of Supreme Lord, Atma Rama means one who is fixed in the spiritual activities in relation with Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul is the living entity. When they engage in reciprocation of service and benediction, the living entity is said to be in the Atmarama position. The Atmarama position can be attained by one who knows the truth as it is. The truth is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the enjoyer, and the living entities are meant for his service and enjoyment. See, this is the truth. Once somebody understands this, then you are in Atmarama position. That means you are always fixed in the service and the lotus feet of the Lord, right? One who knows this truth and who tries to engage all his resources in the service of the Lord escapes all material reactions and influences of the modes of material nature. This is the truth. This is the secret, right? One who knows the truth and engages his resources in the service of the Lord, and he is escaping from all the material entanglements. Right? Let's look at this nice example of Prabhupada. An example may be cited in this connection. Just as a materialist engages in constructing a big skyscraper, a devotee is engaging in construction of a temple for Vishnu. Superficially, the skyscraper constructor and temple constructor are on the same level, for both are controlling the wood, stone, iron, and other building materials. But the person who constructs a skyscraper is a materialist, and the person who constructs a temple is Vishnu, is Atmarama. The materialist tries to satisfy himself in relation to the body by his body by constructing a skyscraper, but the devotee tries to satisfy the super self, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by constructing a temple. Although both are engaged in the association of material activities, the devotee is liberated and the materialist is conditioned. This is because the devotee who is constructing the temple has fixed his mind upon Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the non-devotee who is constructing a skyscraper has mind fixed in sense gratification. If while performing any activity, even material existence, one's mind is fixed upon the lotus feet of Supreme Personality of Godhead, one will not be entangled or conditioned. The worker in devotional service is in full Krishna consciousness. So what are we doing all? We are constructing a temple, we're constructing a center for Krishna, right? So we are engaged in his devotional service. Even though we are dealing with plywood, we are dealing with iron, we are ordering chandeliers, we are in touch with all the material elements, but we are untouched. We are we are aloof from all that because we are utilizing our energy and money and everything in constructing a temple for Krishna. Similarly, we're constructing a rath for Krishna, right? Even though it appears that we are all busy going to the person who is building the rath, buying stuff and everything, but as it's helping us fix our minds, because we're thinking always, how can we make the rath better? How can we make we are upgrading it, we are putting brakes to it, we are putting nice bells. So we are always thinking about Krishna, how we can make Lord Jagannath sit in the rath and he is nicely going around with shock absorbers. How people are taking a darshan of it, and how people will be happy looking at Jagannath, how Jagannath will be happy looking at all the people, and how to plan this in all the communities so that everybody gets darshan. We are worried about all those things. We are worried about all that, but in the service of the Lord, right? And that is what we are doing. The workers, we are all workers in devotional service, and that makes us independent and out of the influence of the material nature. Perfect example given by Prabhupada here. 27. Yadaivam adhyatma rataha kalena bahujanmana sarvatra jata vairagya abhrama bhuvanan muni. When a person thus engages in devotional service and self-realization for many, many years and births, he becomes completely reluctant to enjoy any one of the material planets, even up to the highest planet, which is known as Brahmaloka. He becomes fully developed in consciousness, right? Anyone engaged in devotional service of Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as a devotee. But there is a distinction between pure devotees and mixed devotees. Remember, I told you in the beginning, this chapter is about Jnana Mishra Bhakti. It is more of a Jnana Yoga, for everybody else. But as you see, Prabhupada is mixing Bhakti in every purport because he knows that ultimate goal of all the yogas is Bhakti Yoga. And he doesn't want us to get confused or he knows that we don't have patience to read all the purports or to until the end, because at the end, when Kapil Muni mentions that Bhakti Yoga is the topmost, when Devahoti asks, okay, you told me all these things, now tell me what is the fastest, to reach the 100th floor, what is the fastest way? Taking an elevator, not the steps, right? Similarly, there are more chapters coming up and where Kapil Muni completely alludes to the fact that Bhakti Yoga is the topmost. But Prabhupada, knowing our conditioning, is imparting a lot of bhakti in it, and he's telling about this sloka. This explanation is about Jnana Mishra Bhakti, jnanis who are in the path when they get liberated is explained here. But Prabhupada is explaining about Bhakti Yoga here, right? There are pure devotees and mixed devotees, and Prabhupada always wants us to become or try to become pure devotees, right? A mixed devotee engages in devotional service for spiritual benefit of being externally engaged in transcendental abode of the Lord in full bliss and knowledge. In material existence, when a devotee is not completely purified, he expects material benefit from the Lord in the form of relief from material miseries, or he wants material gain, advancement in knowledge of relationship between Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity, or knowledge as to the real nature of Supreme Lord. When a person is transcendental to these conditions, he is called a pure devotee. So, a mixed devotee and pure devotee are explained here. And Prabhupada wants us all to think about a pure devotee concept, and he wants us to completely be aloof. And then he said all the time, give this one life to Krishna and be very sincere in discharging your duties as a devotional services, and be very serious in this path, because as jnanis, to realize this, right? Bahunam janmana mante jnana man prapadyate. So basically they take, when somebody to realize this path of Jnana Mishra Bhakti, it takes many, many births and many, many lives, and we don't want to be in that path. Kali Yuga is already 5,000 years done, and if you do any more maybe pious activities or things like this, you have to take birth again, to continue this journey, and the Kali Yuga will progress and Ghora Kali will come. You don't want to be in that. Prabhupada always said, give this one life to Krishna and go back to Godhead. Don't want to come again and again and continue this journey, right? He does not engage himself in the service of the Lord for any material benefit or for understanding of Supreme Lord. His one interest is that he loves the Supreme Personality of Godhead and spontaneously engage in satisfying him, right? So Prabhupada wants us to engage in service of the Lord and have a spontaneous love. Raganuga Bhakti is the ultimate, topmost Bhava Bhakti, right? We are all sadhakas now, we are in the sadhaka Bhakti stage, but with all the processes of Bhakti, we should all try to attain to that level of Raganuga Bhakti, spontaneous love. The love to the God is the more important thing. And the example is given here. The highest example of pure devotional service is that of gopis in Vrindavan. They are not interested in understanding Krishna. They only are loving him. That is the difference between a jnani and a pure devotional, a pure devotee. The jnani is trying to understand the Lord by speculation, mental concoction. But devotees like, pure devotees like gopis, they are not interested in all that. They are just loving him. They always think about him and they always think how to serve him, how to love him. They are pure love. That platform of love is the purest state of devotional service. Unless one is advanced to the purest state of devotional service, there is tendency to desire elevation to a higher material position. A mixed devotee may desire to enjoy a comfortable life on another planet with a greater span of life, such as in Brahmaloka. These are material desires, but because of mixed devotee engaged in service of the Lord, ultimately, after many, many lives of material enjoyment, he undoubtedly develops Krishna consciousness, and the symptom of this Krishna consciousness is that he is no longer interested in any sort of materially elevated life. He does not even aspire to become personally like Lord Brahma. So a jnani, tries in the slow path of understanding the Lord, and then he does some penances, he gets to Brahmaloka, higher planets, he gets a longer span of life, but again he falls down, again he continues the journey, and finally he'll attain. A jnani also attains Lord Krishna finally, but with many, many lives and many, many births. And Prabhupada is saying, try to become a pure devotee, try to get liberated, and you don't want to do this, right? But in this sloka, Kapil Muni is explaining how a jnana mishra bhakti or a jnani can attain, Krishna. Once he's gone through this complete cycle and completely gets detached, at the end he will say, I don't want all this, and then he attains Krishna also. The jnani also attains him. 28 to 29. Madbhakta pratibuddhartho mad prasadena bhuyasa nishreya sanam swa samstitanam kaivalyakhyam madashrayam prapannoti prapnoti hanjasa dhira swadrisha achina samshaya yadgatva na nivartetva yogi lingad vinirgame. My devotees actually become self-realized by my unlimited causeless mercy, and thus, when freed from all doubts, he steadily progresses towards his destined abode, which is directly under the protection of my spiritual energy of unadulterated bliss. That is the ultimate perfection of the goal of living entity. After giving up the present material body, the mystic devotees go to the transcendental abode and never comes back. Right? That's what is talked about here. About jnanis, as I said. Actual self-realization means becoming pure devotee of the Lord. The existence of devotee implies the junction of devotion and the object of devotion. Self-realization ultimately means to understand the personality of Godhead and the living entities, to know the individual self and the reciprocal exchanges of loving service between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity is real self-realization. This cannot be attained by impersonalists or other transcendentalists. They cannot understand the science of devotional service. Devotional service is revealed to them pure devotees by unlimited causeless mercy of the Lord. This is especially spoken here by the Lord, Mat Prasadena, by my special grace. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Only those who engage in devotional service with love and faith receive the necessary intelligence from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that gradually and progressively they can advance the abode for the Personality of Godhead. Nishrayesha means ultimate destination. Swasamstita indicates that impersonalists have no particular place to stay. The impersonalists sacrifice their individuality so that the living spark can merge into an impersonal effulgence emanating from transcendental body of the Lord. But the devotee has specific abode. The planets rest in the sunshine, but the sunshine itself has no particular resting place. When one reaches a particular planet, then he has a resting place. The spiritual sky, which is known as Kaivalya, is simply blissful light on all the sides, and it is under the protection of Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14.27, Brahmano hi pratishthanam. The impersonal Brahman effulgence rests on the body of Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, the bodily effulgence of Supreme Personality of Godhead is Kaivalya, or impersonal Brahman. In that impersonal effulgence, there are spiritual planets which are known as Vaikunthas, chief of which is Krishna Loka. Some devotees are elevated to the Vaikuntha planets and some are elevated to the planet Krishna Loka, according to the desire of the particular devotee. He is offered a particular abode which is known as Swasamsthana, his desired destination. By the grace of the Lord, the self-realized devotee engaged in devotional service understands his destination even while in the material body. He therefore performs these devotional activities steadily without doubting, and after quitting his material body, he at once reaches his destination for which he has prepared himself. After reaching that abode, he never comes back to the material world. The words Lingad Vinirgame, which are used here, mean after being freed from the two kinds of material bodies, subtle and gross. The subtle body is made of a mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness. And the gross body made up of 5 elements: earth, water, fire, ether. When one is transferred to the spiritual world, he gives up both subtle and gross bodies of the material world. He enters the spiritual sky in this pure spiritual body and is stationed in one of the spiritual planets. Although impersonalists also reach the spiritual sky after giving up the subtle and gross material bodies, they are not placed in the spiritual planets as they desire. They are allowed to merge in the spiritual effulgence emanating from the central body of the Lord. The word Swasamsthanam is also very significant. As a living entity prepares himself, he so attains his abode. The impersonal Brahman effulgence is offered to the impersonalist, but those who want to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental abode as Narayana in the Vaikunthas or with Krishna Loka, go to those abodes, pay from, they never return. So Kapil Muni is explaining how Jnanis go to the destinations, impersonalists go to the impersonal Brahman, and the pure devotees, based on their desire, go to different planets, right? The impersonal Brahman is the effulgence from the Lord that is emanating all over the place. There is no resting place there, it is just effulgence. But there are planets in Vaikuntha. There are different planets in Vaikuntha. And the topmost planet of Vaikuntha planet is Krishna Loka. And based on different people's desires, Krishna places them in different planets. The planets are the resting places where you can go and rest. Whereas the effulgence is all pervading. It's not a resting place. It is just all pervading. If Jnanis or impersonalists desire to merge into the Brahman, Krishna grants the wish. If the Bhaktas desire to go to a different planet, and he gives different kind of liberation, Sayujya, Sarupya, Salokya, and based on their desires. But the ultimate destination is Krishna Loka, where you leave your material body of the 5 gross elements, you leave your subtle body with false ego, intelligence, mind. You leave all that. You in a pure spiritual form, you reach the Krishna Loka and you serve him eternally. That's what happens. More knowledge is given here about what happens when you leave this material world. Last sloka for this canto. Yadana yoga pa chitta uso cheto mayashu siddhasya visajyatenga ananya hetushva atma me gatisyad atyantaki yatrana mrityu hasaha. Translation. When a perfect yogi's attention is no longer attracted by the byproducts of mystic powers, which are manifestations of his external energy, his progress towards me becomes unlimited, and thus the power of death cannot overcome him. So Krishna is talking about mystic yogis, how they reach him. Purport. Yogis are generally attracted by to the byproducts of mystic yogic power, for they can become smaller than the smallest or greater than the greatest, achieve anything they desire, have power to even create a planet or bring anyone they like under their subjection. Yogis who have incomplete information of the result of the devotional service are attracted by these powers, but these powers are material. They have nothing to do with the spiritual progress. As the other material powers are created with material energy, mystic yogic powers are also material. A perfect yogi's mind is not attracted by any material power. He is simply attracted by the unalloyed service of Supreme Lord. For a devotee, the process of merging into Brahman effulgence is considered hellish, and yogic power or preliminary perfection of yogic power is able to control the senses is automatically achieved. As for the elevation to higher planets, a devotee considers this to be simply hallucinatory. A devotee's attention is concentrated only upon the eternal loving service of the Lord, and therefore the power of death has no influence over him. In such devotional state, a perfect yogi can attain the status of immortal knowledge and bliss. So Kapil Muni is talking about the yogic powers and how yogis attain. And the purport, Vapada is talking about yogic powers. Yes, you can attain them, but he is telling those are of no use because they are also external powers of Lord. And a yogi who makes progress in his, in his yogic mystic powers does not make any spiritual progress. He is very clear on that, right? Some yogis are very much attached to these powers, like siddhis. They can become smaller than smallest, bigger than the biggest. They can influence people. We can see a lot of yogis and siddhis in the material world that are doing all these magics, right? They are also provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're all his external energies. But a pure devotee has nothing to do with it. He doesn't want any of these things. And these materialistic powers or siddhis will not give you any spiritual progress, right? And for a devotee, the process of merging to Brahman is hellish. He doesn't want to do that. A pure devotee always wants to serve the Lord, and thus he always asks for being part of the Krishna Loka, serving him all the time, right? That is his perfection. He doesn't want any of these yogic powers, right? A devotee considers this to be simply hallucinatory, all these powers. In such a devotion, a perfect, So even yogis, after doing all these mystic powers and all that, they realize they're all of no use, and then they attain Krishna as well, but after many, many births, right? So that is the perfection of a yogi. The final liberation of a yogi is explained in this sloka. So that's the final sloka. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 27th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Understanding Material Nature. Thank you very much, everyone. Prabhuji's Matajis for attending this class and reading with me. As I said before, this canto is a very heavy canto, and these chapters are very heavy because these are all Kapila Gita is explained here. Lord Kapila explaining Devahuti. I tried my best to explain as much as possible, but please go back and read them again and again. The purports are very, very nicely written. The first 10 purports we read very nicely in the yesterday's class. Today we try to read as much, but please go back and read again. These instructions are continuing. Next week more of these instructions are given. Please continue to attend these. Very nice canto, one of the best cantos that I have read so far. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity today for reading Bhagavatam along with you. Any doubts, questions, supporting comments, please add them. And then, yes.
Thank you very much, Roji, for a wonderful class. Really, it was amazing Ekadashi, starting it with hearing Bhagavatam and that took Kapila Dev's prayers. It was, as you said, it was a lot of philosophy, a lot of jnana. But, while I was hearing, I really felt it was like a recap of everything Prabhupada again and again explained about Bhakti Yoga, the importance of Bhakti Yoga as compared to all other paths. So thank you very much. I'm really grateful.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. And perfect examples of making Rath and center, explain. I really saw the parallels here. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu. Satyadeva Prabhu, you were saying something.
Prabhuji. So here, yogi who has mystic power. So if the yogi uses that mystic power for the for a better cause of living entities, is it that also considered as not a correct way?
Prabhuji, what is the better cause of living entities? What is the highest you can do for a living entity, Prabhu? What is the benefit? What is the highest benefit you can do for a living entity?
To bring them back to Krishna.
Perfect. So, I don't know, because the yogi has materialistic powers and typically they use for material benefits, right? As you have seen many people utilizing, but a bhakta is utilizing his powers or his energy in bringing people back to Godhead, like preaching, like we do, right? So how much ever you do, if yogi utilizes the powers for the ultimate cause, yes, it is used. But still, Prabhuji, they are all materialistic powers. The yogi is unnecessarily wasting his energy and time in doing all that instead of going in the pure path of bhakti, as Prabhupada mentions, right? Because for those siddhis as well, he has to do a lot of tapasya, penances. The time is limited, right? With the limited time we have, Prabhupada is saying utilize for the service of the Lord and become a pure bhakta. But a yogi, in order to attain those siddhis itself, he has to do a lot of tapasyas and austerity. He has to go somewhere in Himalaya, sit and attain those siddhis. And he's wasting his time even getting those. And then again, utilizing them for something else, he has already done his life. And then he has to come back again because he has not fulfilled or he has not done the complete pure bhakti. Right, Prabhuji? So it doesn't matter, because it does take time for him, because first of all, it's not possible in this age to become a yogi, and because there is no secluded place where you can go and do penances and attain those siddhis. And once you attain those siddhis, what do you do with them, right? And how do you do that? The easiest path is to become a bhakta and help other people come in the path. Why do you have to go through all the austerities and then the toughest path? Right? So even if you do that, your life is limited, and then you finish your life without attaining the highest perfection. You come back again and continue your path. And that's why it is said that it takes more and more births and more time for a yogi to be perfected. It is mentioned in all the slokas. And Prabhupada very clearly is telling, right? You can do it. It's like the detour. You are asking me to come to your place from my place, and I'm taking outer ring road. It's like that. Why do you want to do all that? I can straight away come to your place, right? So that's what I explained here, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, Mataji. Any other questions, comments?
Nothing, Prabhu.
Yeah, one thing, Prabhuji. Sorry,
Yes,
can I talk?
Yes, Prabhuji, please. Hare
Yeah. No, one thing is, Prabhuji, when we say yogi, lot of times people think about somebody doing tapasya only, right? Sitting in the hills is doing some kind of tapasya. But actually, yogi also means somebody who tries to control his mind, but try to focusing on a certain point, right? So another way of looking at it, I felt, is, even materialistic people are indirectly kind of yogis only, who are focusing their mind and all their energies on temporary things, accumulating temporary things. You call it, they're not siddhis, but, they are like something like siddhis where, they want to have power, they want to have influence, they want to have, they want to become famous, like that, and but all those things are temporary. And even the yogis, siddhis, or these materialistic accumulations, which everybody is so much focused on, are not going to be relieving him from the cycle of birth and death. Ultimately, only Bhakti Yoga can take you out of this cycle. And of course, that is not the main focus of Bhakti Yoga, to get out of this cycle. Bhakti Yogi doesn't even ask for getting out of the cycle. It's Krishna who takes him back. But, these materialistic people living are also little yogis, who want to keep their entire focus on, materialistic things. And they think that, okay, I'll finish this, then I will focus on God. I'll finish this, then I will start my main progress. They waste their, life accumulating things, houses, plots, lands, positions. And they are little siddhis, the way they look at it. Like, siddhi means what? You can do what others cannot do. You have some kind of special power. These all desires are also like, yogic, kind of thinking process is that, oh, I want, even actually too much health consciousness, too much body consciousness, too much, exercises and yogic postures to increase life is also another kind of siddhi only you're asking for. But where is Krishna in the whole process, right? Prabhupada many times says that what's the use of living like an elephant for hundreds of years if you don't have a proper goal of life? So it's a very intriguing chapter and a lot of amazing purports, I believe. And I really feel like going and reading them again. Just thought I'll share this. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Yes, you're absolutely right. And this is a completely Kapila Gita, as you know, Prabhuji, as you all know, that it's completely explained whatever is in Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yoga, Jnana Extra Bhakti. Then next chapter is about Ashtanga Yoga. That we're going to talk about, and then there is a devotional service. The complete Bhakti Yoga is also being explained. So yes, Prabhuji. So you're right and absolutely correct about being the yogi definition of a yogi and how we should take it as a bhaktas. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments, Prabhuji's Mataji's? It's already late, 9 o'clock. So let's all wrap up now and meet next week. Vancha kalptarabhyascha krupasindabhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Prabhu.
Thank you.
Dandavat.
Giraj Prabhu,
Hare
Dandavat Pranam. Good to see you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.